Well, hello there.
Hello, Representative. How are you?
I'm doing great, Johnny. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. First things first, the last 24 hours, how are you feeling? Just how are you feeling?
I honestly, as I've talked about it throughout the day with people around me, with my friends, with my colleagues, I feel a couple of different ways. I am very angry, of course, like everybody else. There are lots of different reasons to be angry. There's a lot to be frustrated about here, and we're going to talk about some of it. But I'm also pretty sad. I'm of an age where to see, that picture of the sort of generic outlines of bodies up against, the huge the monuments up against Congress and stone and and concrete walls and the images that came out of this will be a part of our culture for the rest of my life. And I'm not stunted by it, as I've said to a number of people. I'm actually pretty driven by how angry I am about it. And there's a lot that I think that we need to do in these next days and weeks to address it, to make sure that we don't ever see something like this again.
Absolutely. Well, I want to say thank you for even taking time out of your schedule to speak to us here at Logo Live. So yesterday, for anyone who's watching and hasn't understood what's happened, yesterday a group of apparent domestic terrorists took on the U.S. Capitol while Congress was certifying Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's electoral college win. So I know that you have a lot of thoughts as a politician yourself. What did this mean? I mean, this came to a boiling point, basically. It's not the first time we've heard that something like this might happen. There were lots of tweets, there were lots of speeches and rallies that led up to this moment. What can you say about what transpired before that led to this, just us boiling over?
Listen, I think that anybody that's got the intellectual capacity to understand what conspiracy looks like, to understand what it means to beat the drum of insurgency, to beat the drum of sedition, that they would fully understand that the weeks and months, and of course the years leading up to this, but certainly the last 8 weeks, the last 12 weeks leading up to this is very much was the natural extension of not just the rhetoric that we were hearing, but the very intentional propagandizing. What this is, and as I've spoken about very often, is that we're not just saying sedition, we're saying seditious conspiracy. We have seen people cross the line with respect to treason. The insurrection yesterday, the riot yesterday, however we choose to call it, was a form of domestic terrorism. All of those things, are running through my mind. And I think one of the things that's important to remember is that there are people all across the world that understand what anti-national criminal behavior actually looks like and why this is that. But we in America are so used to not seeing anything like this that we've almost begun to think that these things are like terms of art instead of actual terms of law. That have components, that have elements, and these actions rise to those elements. And so, whereas some people will tell you this is an isolated incident, somebody will tell you that tempers flared or people boiled over, I'll tell you that this is the natural, simply next step, perhaps not the last step, of a long-going, well-fed conspiracy that has involved elected officials, certainly the president, but elected officials on down to state legislatures and in Congress, as Congressman Torres will tell you. Not just Trump voters, not just conservatives, not just the far right, but a very organized campaign to disenfranchise voters and to overthrow the government of the United States, which doesn't sound in any way too grand now, unfortunately.
Correct. And I mean, even today I saw a video that I just had to retweet on Twitter of the debate from 2016 where Hillary Clinton basically states that Donald Trump has always been a sore loser when he didn't win the Emmy. And what stuck out to me the most about the clip was the laughing in the audience, because no one took him seriously. But we've had 4 years of tweets, videos, quotes, just all of this that has been, we've had, the writing has been on the wall. So it's been a little crazy to watch people, not even just on the media but on social media, really saying, I'm so surprised that this would happen here in our country. And it's like it's led up to this moment. So we've had all the ingredients in the pot, and now that it's boiling over, everyone's surprised all of a sudden. How do you feel?
I think those are the same people that don't understand the racial implications of what happened yesterday. Those are the same people that don't understand the impact, for example, of this presidential election on the civil rights that you and I enjoy or don't enjoy, depending on what state we're in. You know, intentional ignorance is, to a lot of people, is like a religion. It's like a faith. And the deeper you dive into it, the more devout you are. And I think that as we hopefully will move into an era that makes it obvious that anti-intellectualism isn't something to adhere to, people will become more reflective. And I don't exactly even think that's the case. I think what's going to happen is simply we are growing a generation of Americans for whom this bullshit is not good enough. And they won't tolerate it. They don't tolerate it. They're not going to spend their time pretending that somebody doesn't understand racism and having to teach them about racism to then teach them why the criminal justice system is institutionally racist. They're beyond that point. They want the change. They're not going to waste time trying to teach somebody who doesn't want to hear it. And so, our job right now is to triage the voices that matter from the ones that don't. For whom people, the minds that we will never change, maybe they're not meant to be changed. The minds that we can change, the minds that are already changed, we tend to think that we're sort of islands. But the truth is we're a continent. There's a massive population in this country, a majority population in this country that believes the things that you and I do. And that's, that's the antidote to what's happening here.
Yeah. I mean, and then the video that the president posted yesterday that was taken down by Twitter, basically saying, we love you, please go home, we love you, the direct contrast to what happened this summer even. Twitter banning him, obviously now, what took them so long? Because, the video didn't sound very different from things that he's been saying for the last 4 years. So why now? Why not? Do you think it was the insurrection itself that really led Twitter to, because they could have done this earlier, possibly preventing something like this from happening. Do you think that social media has a play in what's transpired?
It does, no question. But I think the reason that we saw this move from Twitter yesterday is actually twofold. One of them good and one of them not. I think there are certainly, without question, people within the Twitter community, within the C-suite at Twitter, that were looking at what was happening over the last years and understanding that they've been a part of a populist anti-government movement and fueling misinformation that has proved antithetical to the things that they believe in. And I want to think that they were voicing up at the boardroom table, voicing up during meetings. I think that's part of this. But I also think that the other part of it is that a very economic decision was made, that the tide had turned on the economic gains and benefits of allowing Donald Trump to use their platform. And it had become very clear that the potential negative backlash for allowing him to utilize this platform in such a nefarious way was going to begin to cost them. And so they made, I say, a combination of a moral and a financial decision. That's one that, you and I agree with, but of course, we'll forever question why it wasn't done earlier. Because if it had been done for moral reasons and moral reasons alone, it would have been done, months, if not years ago.
Absolutely. So that brings me to my next topic, social media reacts. Right now we're in the middle of a pandemic, which yesterday I honestly forgot because of everything that was going on. But this is the space right now, shows like this and just Twitter and Facebook and all these places are where we're getting our most up-to-date information. People are sharing stories on the ground, this, that, and the other. It's a really great place also for community building to make sure that you have like-minded people understanding where you're coming from, this, that, and the other. But I will say there's a lot of disinformation that is broadcast, all of these conspiracy theories that are coming out now that, we've dealt with before, but it's always a hassle to deal with them. So you as an elected official, where would you say for the viewers and for the constituents, where would you go to get the most up-to-date news and the most reliable news at the moment?
It's perhaps the ultimate question of the era. And I'd like to think that in 5 or 10 years, a question like that won't even make sense because it'll just be clear where quality, authentic, reliable, science-based, evidence-based news can be found. But for the time being, I have to do the same things that you do. I do triage. Right. There are lots of places that I go. I'm a big NPR fan. I think most people really know that I love NPR for lots of different reasons. But NPR isn't my news source for everything. I do watch a lot of CNN. Of course, I'm familiar with MSNBC. I even will from time to time catch a little Fox News in part because I do want to know what the people who disagree with me are hearing and thinking. But I, like you, social media and, my phone as it sits on my hip is still the basis of much more quality information and information certainly faster than anywhere else. I also think in this era where it, we have to really question where we're getting our news. The quality of who is sharing news is significantly more important. And I have a group of friends, like I'm guessing you do, for whom the issues that I care about are important to them. And, many of them are work more closely with organizations that are reliable or spend more of their time day to day on a particular issue. And so their reliability is something that I sort of borrow by proxy. And, we're able to share lots of information. And I hope in my own ways that the people in my circle, are able to rely on the information that I share.
Correct. I think it's also, yeah, like you said, I do have a couple group chats myself that, I send an article and I said, has anyone heard about this? What's, and then very quickly I'll have, a couple, some people that don't understand and they don't know about it either. And then there's the one person that chimes in and they're like, this is not real. This was actually, debunked and so it is really important to have the conversations. My worry sometimes is that I wonder if the other side is having the same conversations because it's very easy to hear something that you want to hear and say, oh, that's just the way it is. And be like, oh, I agree with that. Whereas, it doesn't matter if you agree with it. Feelings are not facts. So we need to lean really into the
you just
facts.
said the magic words. So I wonder about that as well. And I listen, I'm not going to trick myself into thinking that people who are on Parler or who are listening to OAN are really questioning the honesty or the authenticity of information they're getting and running it through a sort of a reliability test in their head. I don't know if I think that's happening, but I do think that the Fuck Your Feelings crowd certainly has a very feelings-based approach to their public policy, and that public policy seems to be it seems to be based on a lot of quicksand, that things change, that it's a very situational belief in policy, I'll say. And I actually think, Johnny, I think they count on us wrestling with intellectualizing a lot of these ideas while they're, taking away our rights or supporting people that want to attack a person because of the color of their skin.
Correct. Yeah, and that brings me to my next point, a social media shift to a very real thing that happens day to day with a lot of people that are like you and me, a lot of queer people, a lot of people of color have to deal with family members and friends that they've had forever that are specifically Trump supporters. And I wanted to read, this was a tweet from BuzzFeed journalist Christian Zamora. He shares a screen grab from his text with his father. Now, I could go into what the text says and whatnot, but it's more so to highlight the idea of when you're struggling as a queer person to be able to talk to your parents. I mean, one thing I always have a hard time with is just talking about being queer. Now, on top of that, talking about politics and these conspiracy theories that are thrown back at you when you say, do you know, white privilege? And then it's a whole, thing like that. So I don't know if you have any experience in that with family members or whatnot, but what can you as an elected official tell our queer audience here and family how to get through dealing with that?
Sure. You know what? I have a lot of experience with it, and not because of my family. My mom and dad are both retired lieutenant colonels in the Army. They are wonderful people. I have a twin brother and some other siblings that are all, fantastic people for whom coming out was never an issue for me. And, family dinners are fantastic. But I also work in a place where the majority party that controls the place thinks that you and I and a lot of people that are watching are second-class citizens and don't deserve our rights. And I have to sit down and have conversations about, bridges and roads and economic development with people who think that, that I shouldn't be allowed to get married. And so I do have a lot of experience with this. And I think one of the mistakes that we all often make is thinking that we really need to impart upon this other person our beliefs, and they actually have to understand them and acknowledge them. And that's just not a particularly realistic thing. And so I think there's a couple of different approaches. One of it is that all of us have got to figure out those people in our life for whom no degree of discussion, intervention is going to mean or do a thing. That's a hard conversation to have with yourself. And it's a tough realization to come to about certain people in your life. And maybe after coming to that realization, you You have a second level of triage about whether you keep them in your life. But, a lot of us keep people in our lives who don't fully understand and know us, sometimes because of family relationships, sometimes because of work relationships. The second two groups are the harder part. And that's that if you engage this person, will it make a difference? And if you engage this person, will it make a difference? And will your relationship still be okay? And, I tell people all the time, when you're thinking about coming out, it's not about how many people you come out to that determines whether or not you're out. You're out. And if you're thinking about using your life experiences as a queer person and knowing how you're impacted by politics to engage another person to talk about politics, it's not about making sure that they understand the full breadth of your experience. They never could. Oftentimes political engagement is those little micro moments, in the same way that so many of us were marginalized by microaggressions, and those little micro moments, we know how valuable they can be. And so I think we sort of need to use our experiences with that and use those moments to push for change when we can. And if not, don't spin your wheels. I don't believe in Sisyphean tasks. Don't waste your time. Spend your time on the people that want to be with you, that care about you, and for whom you can have an impact on their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even personally for me, I do have family members that are Trump supporters. And I will say, I don't know if anyone in the comments understands, but there's this thing about being queer where a lot of people do have a great coming out and, a very supportive family. And, sometimes there's that back and forth of, this is why I should be allowed the same rights as you. There's that conversation. So when you get to a point where it's like, okay, I accept the fact that you're queer. And then on top of that comes this man, this politician, these many politicians that want to take my rights away. Then I have to have another conversation where I have to continuously explain to you why this person that you so ardently support will be so hurtful to me. It's almost like at 4 years of it, I don't know how anyone else in the comments feels, but 4 years of it just takes you out. And I've learned for myself, what works for me is that I just don't engage. Because there are a lot of aspects about my family that I do love. And, not everyone is a Trump supporter or whatnot, but it is that thing, because I will just block them. You just block them from speaking to them on social media. And, it really does take a toll on your psyche. So for me, I don't engage anymore. If I'm asked a question, I'll respond. But like you said, it's better to focus on the people that you can either change or, focus on reaching to them. So,
sure. And to be honest, Johnny, most of us we're not required to have every single person in our life know every single thing about us.
Right.
What I will say, though, is that, there's an interesting thing about privilege that plays in when these conversations happen, when people are trying to figure out, where do I push? How can I push? Obviously go where you're most effective, but also recognize that most of us are effective with our family members. We can have the greatest impact with respect to advancing LGBTQ rights, advancing an understanding of institutional racism and white privilege and the dangers of white supremacy. We really can have a great impact having those conversations with the people closest to us. There's no amount of advocacy that I have ever done generically that makes up for the conversations that people have with their families when they're coming out of the closet, for example. And it's a really important thing to remember.
Yeah. And always just let them know, everyone watching, you can disagree with me on what we get on our pizza, but you're not going to disagree with my human rights, period. So that being said, we are moving forward. We just, the country did experience some great wins, some, landmark wins in Georgia that were unfortunately, sidelined because of everything that happened yesterday. But we're going to try and get back to it as soon as we can. What do you think happens next? We have Joe Biden and Kamala going to be, inaugurated in 13 days, I think it was. We have so much going on with, Speaker Pelosi coming out and saying that she would be more than happy to invoke the 25th Amendment. Where do you think we're going next, Brian?
I'm going to do this really quickly. I do believe that the president's probably going to be impeached here in these next couple of weeks. For people that are thinking if that's a waste of time, it does help with respect to a lot of cutting off the access to information that he as a president, for example, would have as a former president, and the amount of security briefings and all the information that he'd be required to be given. If he's been impeached, not only do we not have to do that, I think it helps down the road with further indictments, whether they be in federal court or in New York, for example. So I think there is a strategic gain to him being impeached, because I don't think that the 25th Amendment, I don't think is going to come into play. I think Pence has made it very clear he's not going to invoke it. This cabinet is not going to vote for it, even though some of the cabinet members are jumping ship right now, so to avoid having to make that vote. But much more importantly than that, right? So what is the first 100 days going to look like of a Biden presidency, of a Kamala vice presidency? Those are the bigger, better questions. Now that we've got the control of the Senate, the majority in the House, and the White House, a bunch of big things have to happen in the next 2 years. We first and foremost, we have to have a massive rethink, rehaul, rebuild, and refund of the criminal justice system. There's just no way, no reason that we could ever, after these years, wait and make that a second, third, or fourth priority. Yes, we need to have a Green New Deal. Yes, we need to eliminate student debt. Yes, we need to make sure that the federal government isn't using its citizens as a revenue source to enter into wars that we don't want to be a part of. But there is virtually nothing that we can do in this country that's going to be good if we are still operating on a fully functioning racist system of criminal justice. And so when that changes, we can start to look to all the other things that can change. And until we have equality there, we're going to have inequality everywhere. There's nothing that can happen, for example, with respect to the LGBTQ community that is real and authentic if it's built upon the racism that still exists at law or in government or in prosecution, or frankly in finance or in media. And so we've got a lot of work to do, but we're going to have at least 2 very strong, very powerful years to do a lot of this. And I know hope feels really weird, right? Optimism feels really strange, but I'm extremely, extremely hopeful for what we're going to see in these next couple of years. You're going to talk to Congressman Torres here, and what a first couple of days at work for him, and I'm so excited about the kind of term that he's going to have, because he's going to be front row and center for some of the biggest changes in modern American history.
Yeah, well, I'm so happy. You all heard it here. Representative Sims just calling it like it is. You can't slap a new coat of paint on things. If the house is broken, you got to rip it up and build a new one. So that is what we are looking forward to doing these next couple years and on. I'm so happy that you were able to join us. I'm so happy that we have you as a representative, not only in our political system, but as a part of our family, not only here at Logo Live, but in our queer family as well. Keep doing the work. Thank you so much for taking time out to speak to us. I will be seeing you very soon, and come back and talk to us whenever.
Johnny, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for changing your program to get right on this. I knew that you'd be able to. I knew that what's going on right now is that's most important, but I really appreciate you jumping into all of this. I think it's really critical for your listeners.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Mwah! Have a great day.